Okay, let's dive into this story about a president who, faced with a crisis that could have ripped the country apart, took on some incredible powers. I mean, powers that a lot of people thought were way, way outside what the Constitution actually allowed.
So just picture this for a second. There's a sudden, shocking attack on the country. The commander-in-chief sends in the troops. Thousands of people, I mean thousands, get arrested because they're suspected of helping the enemy. They're held, but never charged with a crime. And then, the president even gives the green light for military trials for regular citizens. You can just imagine the firestorm, right? A huge, nationwide debate erupts. How do you balance national security with personal freedom?
And the backlash? Oh, it was immediate, and it was fierce. In the halls of government, leaders in Congress were absolutely furious. They accused the president of just stomping all over the most basic rights that every citizen is supposed to have.
That anger wasn't just contained in Washington either. It spilled right out into the open. Newspaper headlines were just hammering the president's decisions, and critics popped up from everywhere. We're talking lawyers, judges, professors, even clergy. All of them joining in, saying, wait a minute, is what the president is doing even legal?
So who is this commander-in-chief we're talking about? Who was it that stretched their power so much, so quickly, that it sent these kinds of shockwaves across the entire nation?
Well, you might be surprised. The president was Abraham Lincoln. The year, 1861. And the crisis, of course, was the American Civil War. It's this incredible moment from our past that, honestly, feels disturbingly familiar today. So yeah, let's unpack this. Let's see how the absolute chaos of 1861 cooked up a constitutional crisis that, believe it or not, we're still talking about today. Okay, so it's the spring of 1861, and things are, well, they're bad. Really bad. Fort Sumter had just been attacked, and Washington, D.C. was basically a city under siege. You had Confederate sympathizers in Maryland cutting railroad and telegraph lines, which meant the capital was almost completely cut off from the north. Lincoln was genuinely afraid that the entire government was about to just fall apart. So to try and save the Union, Lincoln took some really drastic steps. And the key here is that he did it all on his own. He acted completely on his own authority without even waiting for Congress to get back in session. Now, the most controversial thing he did, he suspended something called the writ of habeas corpus. You know, this is a huge deal. It's one of the absolute cornerstones of our legal system. It's basically your right to not be thrown in jail forever without a reason. It means an authority has to bring you before a judge to prove they're holding you legally. So when Lincoln suspended it, he was basically telling the military, you can arrest people and just hold them indefinitely. No judge, no court, no review. And it wasn't just that one thing. The sheer scope of what he did is just staggering. And get this, he did all of this in the 80 days before Congress was even able to get together. He single-handedly made the Army and Navy bigger, spent a bunch of money that Congress hadn't approved, and even blockaded the southern coast, which, by the way, is technically an act of war. He was, for all intents and purposes, ruling by decree.
And here's the thing, Lincoln never tried to hide it. He didn't deny he was pushing the boundaries of presidential power. His argument was pretty straightforward. Look, this is a crisis like we've never seen, and to save the nation itself, sometimes you have to do things that feel wrong. And you can see his thinking perfectly in his own words. He put this question to Congress, and it's a powerful one. He basically asked, are we really going to let all the laws and the government itself crumble into pieces just so we don't violate this one law? It's a heck of a question, right? For him, the answer was a clear no. He took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and in his mind, that meant saving the whole system first, even if he had to bend one of the rules to get it done.
But, as you can imagine, a lot of people were not buying this Constitution of necessity argument. Not at all. And his actions set up this epic constitutional showdown, putting the president on a collision course with the highest court in the land. This all came to a head in a case known as Ex parte Merriman. Here's what happened. The military arrested a secessionist in Maryland. The Chief Justice, Roger Taney, shot back with a writ of habeas corpus and ordered the man released. Taney's point was simple. The power to suspend the writ is in Article 1 of the Constitution. That's Congress's territory. And Lincoln's response to this order from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? He just ignored it, blew right past it. And this power wasn't just used for suspected saboteurs. It was also used to clamp down on political dissent. Take the case of Clement Vallandigham. He was a politician, a very outspoken Democrat from Ohio who hated the war. He was arrested by the Army and put on trial in a military court. not because he did anything violent, but because he gave a speech calling the war wicked, cruel, and unnecessary. He was literally imprisoned for what he said. So you might think, okay, extreme times, extreme measures, but it all ended with the Civil War. But that's not what happened. What Lincoln did created this incredibly powerful and really controversial precedent. It became a kind of blueprint for how future presidents could expand their own power during a national emergency. Let's just follow this thread through history for a second. Right after the war, in a case called Ex parte Milligan, the Supreme Court did say, hey, you can't try civilians in military courts if the regular courts are open. Okay, fair enough. But the idea, the precedent of executive action, that stuck around. Fast forward to World War II, the court actually pointed back to the Civil War to say it was okay to use military tribunals for German saboteurs. And then, much more recently, after 9/11, Lincoln's actions were used as a core part of the legal argument for detaining enemy combatants and setting up new military commissions. And in our own time, the Supreme Court has been wrestling with this legacy over and over again. You see it in a whole series of huge cases about the detainees at Guantanamo Bay. The court has tried to pump the brakes on some of that unchecked executive power. They've ruled that, yes, both foreign nationals and U.S. citizens have a right to be heard in federal courts. And no, the president can't just invent military courts out of thin air. They need Congress's approval for that. It's really the exact same tug of war we saw between Lincoln and Chief Justice Taney, just playing out in the 21st century. So here we are, right back where we started. This basic tension, this constant push and pull between the power of the government and the rights of the individual, especially when things get scary. It's still one of the biggest, most fundamental, and frankly, unresolved questions we have. You know, the historian Mark E. Neely Jr. probably said it best. He argued that the Civil War doesn't give us a clear lesson. There's no neat precedent, no easy map to follow. Looking back at what Lincoln did shows us what a president might do when they truly believe the country is about to fall apart. But it definitely doesn't give us an easy answer about what they should do. And in the end, that leaves us with the very same question that Lincoln's generation had to grapple with, and that every generation since has had to face. In a moment of crisis, how do we strike that balance between the safety we all demand and the freedoms we all cherish? Where do you draw that line? There's no simple answer, but it's a question we absolutely have to keep asking.